Again, these three therapists got pretty famous. And so we need to acknowledge who they were and maybe the flaws that they had and not necessarily say just because they did it, it was right.
You're listening to Mentor Moments, where we talk about all things counseling, technology, education, and career development. I am Braden Wooters, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Michael Keener. Grab a seat, and let's get started.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Mentor Moments. My name is Braden Wooters.
And I'm Mike Keener.
And this isn't just like regular.
I got a new standing desk. And for our fans that watch us, if I'm extra mobile, it's because I'm standing. I'm trying to be hip, standing.
I was going to say, this isn't just regular.
Straight. How about that?
Right. Well, you've seen some of those cameras that will follow you now. If you move around, that's what we need, or people start getting sick maybe. They're watching.
I noticed I was on Zoom in a couple of meetings, and I noticed some cameras maybe not followed you, but moved in and moved out a little bit too.
Creepy. It creeps me out. It makes me I don't like that amount of I don't know, center of it freaks me out. But anyway, why do you let's let our listeners in on your life. Why do we have a standing desk now?
Well, I thought all the young kids were doing standing desks nowadays, so I wanted a standing desk.
That makes sense.
Isn't that the new hip thing?
It is. And we were just talking before we hit record about
6, 7 and standing desks, right? Isn't that 6, 7?
That is so funny. I know that you had that in the chamber ready to fire too. You're like, at what point in this episode can I say 6, 7?
Well, can I drop some 6, 7 on us?
I was gonna say we're not even 2 minutes into recording and you you say 6, 7. Oh my gosh.
Well, I guess all seriousness, I've been having some muscle knots, and it's been impacting nerve pain, where I'm having pain going down my left arm, behind my left shoulder blade. It sort of hurts when I sit on the couch and whatnot. So I've been seeing a physical therapist, chiropractor, doing my exercises and stretches, and everybody just thinks doing a standing desk is just in general good, just to get you moving. But for me, just to make sure that I'm staying more in a neutral, upright position. So that's what's going on in my life.
I love that.
What do we need to know about you? What's going on?
Well, at the time of recording, we're wrapping up this winter semester. So this is my first semester with Lindenwood, working as their athletics mental health therapist. And yeah, great semester. I think that it went really, really well. Thinking about plans for the break. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I get a little neurotic whenever it comes to planning. And so I try to look at my year ahead, and I try to plan as much as I possibly can. And I know that nothing ever actually ends up the way that you plan it. But my whole thing is if I don't put it in my planner, then I'll always put it off. This would be a fun thing to do. But now is probably not the right time. I'll save that for a different time. So if I put it in my calendar, then I kind of force myself to go do that thing that I wanted to do. So, that's kind of what I've been spending my last couple weeks doing, is putting the stuff in the calendar.
Then I want to know what's the top thing you put in your calendar. It's kind of it's almost like you did a resolution without it being New Year's here. So what was that? Yeah.
And I get I think I get super sentimental, not sentimental, but I just get very reflective around this time. And so I'd say the biggest thing right off the top of my head is my dad and we haven't had the chance to go on a one-on-one trip, just me and him. We're always busy. And now that he's retired and now that I'm kind of at a good place, we're going to take a trip to Utah. That's the whole plan. We've been wanting to go do that for a while. I know that he has. I've got the time to go do it. So we're going to hike. We're going to do a lot of hiking. We're going to go through, all the national parks there. Spend a good week there. So that's the biggest kind of thing that's going to come up over. I think we're going to go in March, but that's kind of the big thing right now on
I got 2 questions. Are these day hikes or are these overnight hikes where
we are not camping? Oh my God, no. We are not camping. These are day hikes. My folks, they do camp, but it's closer to glamping, where they own, a camper that has running water and internet. So anything that's further than that is a little, probably not going to be done.
Were you a Boy Scout?
I was.
So next
Well,
time I
technically, I was
see
a
you,
Cub Scout.
we should do a left-handed handshake.
You see, you say that, but I have no clue. I was a Cub
The Boy
Scout.
Scout
So
handshake is left-handed versus right-handed.
I don't know that. Like I said, I was like a whatever the Cub Scout version. I was in like the first grade. So
Oh,
instead
so
of
you
like
weren't a boy. You were a Cub Scout, not a Boy
Cub
Scout.
Scouts. Yes, sorry, Cub Scouts. I stopped after I think fourth grade. I think mostly because
Because you failed, or
the Boy Scout test. Yeah, they
you
asked me at
couldn't
a
start a
time or
fire with flint and steel,
yeah, no, they sent me out into the wilderness and told me to do well, and I don't know, called the police. Couldn't find me
and you
through.
ran into Shrek and Donkey, and they saved you.
So yeah, I was not a Cub Scout,
Okay.
but anyway, I guess maybe this is me trying to earn my badges now that I've hit adulthood. Or were you a Boy Scouts? Then I guess
I
you
was a Boy Scout through my senior year in high school. I was senior patrol leader for 2 years. Troop 56 in Bowmansville, New York. Mr. Gall, our fearless leader.
my God.
I'm still friends with all the Gall boys. Mr. Gall's youngest son, John, we were the same age, so I've known him since kindergarten, and we're still buddies to this day.
That explains like the badge sash that I see.
That's right, that I wear, to class
Around
sometimes.
campus. Yeah, that makes more sense. Got it.
It wasn't my days of being in a pageant. That was my Boy Scout sash, not
Of
my.
course. That was a different life.
Right.
We're not there yet in the season to talk about your pageant days.
Yes. But we often went to the Adirondacks to go either hiking or canoeing, and we often built monkey bridges and towers, and we made our own snowshoes. I mean, Mr. Gall he has since passed away, but he was a remarkable man. He was a pilot. He was a mechanic, sort of a backyard engineer. And again, like we built a steaming box so we could put the wood in there to bend, the wood for the snowshoes, and laced them up. And we made a boat, an ice boat or an ice ship kind of thing. To go, Buffalo, it's icy. So we made, so it's sort of a sailboat on the ice, I guess is the best way to put it. So
Never heard of this. I can only imagine the skills that you end up learning. I don't remember learning anything. So once you get to a certain age, I'm sure that all that becomes like a lot more applicable. So interesting. Okay, let's get into some segment stuff. Any moment of the week, anything that's happened this week that you feel like has been, I don't know, significant, has been impactful for you?
Well, this might be maybe the major theme is, I am creating a practicum course for those of you that are listening and maybe not familiar with sort of counseling curriculum. Practicum is your first experience in the field. So, but what I am doing is something, that's maybe universal or somewhat universal to so many counseling programs is we're using a film called 3 Approaches to Psychotherapy, or otherwise known as the Gloria films. This film was made in I think it was filmed in 1964, but released in 1965. It emphasized or showed Gloria Samansky. So the same woman, she worked with 3 different therapists. So she worked with Carl Rogers from a person-centered perspective, Fritz Perls from the Gestalt perspective, and then Albert Ellis from a REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. And the film was designed to sort of let people know behind the curtain of what counseling was like. And so to me, it's been fun sort of reliving that, if you will, and sort of, I guess, looking at different ways to integrate it into course to help students sort of view it from a historical lens, also a modern lens, from an ethical, cultural lens. The 3 therapists, they're very, they develop their theory. So they're very theory driven, which maybe today we're more collaborative based. So again, just sort of interesting to see the different ways we can view it as a historical document, but also use it for modern day learning.
And so I guess having had that video utilized in my education, you're talking about modern education. How would you say it was like typically used in a classroom then?
I guess I would say historically, right, it was used to say what counseling was.
Hmm.
Then, as you said, I think you evolved to, okay, these are examples of three different techniques. And now the longer we have come from 1965, now the different ways we can look at it. And I think when YouTube came out, I think it had a revision. Somebody uploaded it to YouTube. And so it made to have access so much easier. And then you could sort of really break it down a little bit. Okay, how does somebody start? How did the three therapists, start the session? What critique it for what are the true interventions from each perspective, and then how did it close? If for those of you that maybe didn't seen it or haven't seen it in a while or only saw snippets, there each session, like when Carl Rogers started, he talked about person-centered for about 5-10 minutes, then went into the session, and then he sort of reflected on it. And so that's how each of the three segments went. The individual who created it, and maybe we can dissect this a little bit, his name was Everett Shostrom, and he was a therapist as well. And again, that was his idea to create it. And Gloria Samansky was actually a client of Dr. Shostrom. And so maybe there's some, I don't know, maybe our ethical tingles just went off. Like, was there a power differential? Did Gloria really feel like she had enough information to say yes? Did she feel pressured to do it? And we could talk a little bit more about that. But I guess I sort of rambled there a little bit. So I think to answer your question, it was probably used in snippets to learn about the techniques or what counseling is. And then today we're sort of, again, looking at it from more of a historical perspective, maybe with, again, that 2020 hindsight.
Yeah. And I think the only part that I remember, have the first time watching first of all, like if you're listening to this episode, like I really recommend like you go look for the video. Like if this is if there's a good pause, like this would be the time to pause. Go find the video, like watch some snippets of it. You don't have to watch the full thing, but just to get an idea of kind of what we're talking about. And then feel free to come back here at this timestamp. But I remember, the first time watching that video in class. And one thing that I remember noting was just how helpful it was to make it more real in terms of like we'd spend all this time talking about theory. And in my brain, it's like there's this old dude that like doesn't really apply to life at all. And then all of a sudden he's on the screen doing it in front of me, where it just kind of reminded me that psychotherapy isn't nearly as old as maybe I thought it was. And it provided a little more context and made it a little bit more real that these aren't just unobtainable people or just like disconnected. It's all very connected. It's very like you can watch them do it right now. So.
Well, I'm glad you said that because if we think Freud was the sort of the beginning of sort of talk therapy, he was at, the late 1800s, the early 1900s. And so even in 1965, it's still relatively new, right? Mm-hmm. And really all of the modern theorists, right, sort of emerged as a sort of evolution of psychodynamic or as a contrast to, right? And so, again, many of the early therapists were, again, studied under Freud or Freud's daughter and then sort of evolved out of, or, Albert Ellis, openly talks about that he was a psychoanalyst and just wasn't working for him. And that's what drove him to study. And again, Carl Rogers is sort of, the complete opposite sometimes of a Freudian blank slate where he wants to show emotion and empathy and whatnot.
And I think the great thing about the Gloria Tapes is that they get kind of all of them. Like it's very rare, I think, to get all the kind of the big name hitters in one video, all kind of cohesive like that. Like I think that's a big reason why we gravitate towards those videos, is because we're not like pulling like 3 or 4 or 5 different videos from random sources. It's all in one, which is just kind of, I don't know, very significant that they pulled that off.
And maybe a little known fact, they actually created 3 sets of this film, right? So now I'm going to blank on the years, but the first one was 65. I think the other one was mid to late 70s. And the last one was, again, maybe 10 years later, 86. And Carl Rogers was in two, like the first and the second series of this as well. Like today, I go back and I try to find some other of the theorists, and so much of the work is copyrighted, or like you need to have access, or they only show, 2 minutes of something, where sort of the beauty of this is, again, you have an entire session. Again, from that learning perspective, we can, if we have time, we can kind of get into some of the ethical things as well.
And so, I'm trying to think if I had any more thoughts. I think the only other piece that I remember was just how interesting Gloria was. I like when you think like historically, she is so. I remember the first time watching, I'm like, she's so put together, so prim and proper. She is like very, I don't know, just not at all what I expected. I'm not really sure what I expected, but it was. I just found Gloria very interesting in those, and I'm glad that you brought up kind of how she entered into the mix, because that adds an extra layer of like,
right,
authentic. Was she being super authentic considering her prior relationship with this video, or was she like, how did I get here? Now I'm talking to three random dudes. I thought that was so interesting, just the way that she operated in that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that too, because I know when I was going through school, right, there was all these urban legends, like she committed suicide, or she was an actress, or that she had inappropriate, sexual relationships with the therapist. Again, all of that was false, right? There's a couple of things, so I'm just hesitating on what I wanted to start with first. So she, from what I understand from reading some of the stuff that's been published about it, that she originally was supportive of this, right? And did go to some counseling conferences and sort of present either by herself or with some of the other theorists, there. But ultimately, she ended up suing Sjostrom because he started, it was supposed to be designed for educational purposes, but then they released this film into the theaters. So it sort of went beyond, right? And ultimately, she lost the suit because of the consent or the releases that she signed, that she didn't really have, I guess, the legal grounds to sue that. She did. It's interesting when you watch the films that, you can, Carl Rogers, again, is very Carl Rogers-esque. He's seems like a very warm, genuine, unconditional, positive regard. Fritz Perls is very confrontational. He's trying to get you to get awareness, right? To get in the here and now. So he's very, a little bit of, I want to say combative, but maybe combative is the right word.
Yeah.
Aggressive. Albert Ellis is maybe somewhere in between, but maybe a little bit more on the aggressive side. He's very more educational. He's trying to teach Gloria about her irrational beliefs and where that thinking comes from. And this is where we don't really know, because Gloria mentioned maybe like feeling the most comfort with Rogers, but maybe getting the most benefit out of Fritz Perls, and even saw him a little bit afterwards. But that's where we don't really know if, because of Sjostrom and Fritz Perls being colleagues and friends, maybe there was, like, she felt like she had to see him, although, again, that didn't sort of last. So it's really unsure what theory she felt most connected to or felt benefit from. Another, I don't know if it's a little known fact, if you remember, for those of you that watched it, Gloria mentions her daughter, Pammy, right? And Pammy, I believe it was 2013, she wrote a book called Living with the Gloria Films, A Daughter's Memory, written by her daughter. And so, again, if that's interest to you, I am trying to get a copy of that, just to kind of maybe get, again, perspective, the family's perspective, sort of life after, which, again, we have this time capsule of 1965. So, and again, I guess just Gloria did die in 1979 at the age of 46 from leukemia. So, she did not necessarily have a long life. And so again, she was 30 when she filmed this, which is usually something I tell the students, predict how old you think Gloria is, because I see an older person just from hairstyle and dress, and
Yeah.
okay, yeah, she's, so. And again, I think all three therapists look pretty old, and I guess I don't really know how old they were as well, but
And I have so many thoughts from everything that we're talking about. The first being, the fact that they played it in a movie theater, like, just kind of it raises for me more questions than answers. Where I'm like, what why in a movie theater? Like, was that like the common thing that they were playing, or was it just simply like, what will get people's attention? Let's throw this on. Like, I just can't ever imagine going to a movie theater to watch something like that. I don't
yeah,
know.
I don't know if I have an answer unless it was just maybe curiosity of people. Again, I think since the pandemic, again, counseling has been in a positive way brought into the mainstream media. And so you can only wonder what it was like in 1965. And so maybe there was this curiosity in doing a little bit more of research around this in the 60s. Right. They had what was called the encounter movement, and it was people trying to get self-aware. And a lot of the films you see of Albert Ellis was filmed in California at this institute where he would hold these encounter groups. And so it almost looks like he's counseling the same people all the time. But what it really was it's the weekend long sort of encounter group that he filmed. And so, you really need to, again, I guess, have that information to view it, that these really aren't clients or a group. It's sort of people coming to sort of work with what they would say is sort of like a guru, and so there is, again, just that, I guess, grain of salt that to kind of, when you view these things, that it's not counseling, but you do see Fritz Perls really working in the here and now, and with some of the different, open chair techniques, or just having people feel sensations in their hands, and really, which is another interesting thing. I know I'm going sideways here. He's a smoker, right? And you just see him openly, light up and just smoke. And and then like Gloria lights up at one time too, which is just, again, from a 2025 perspective, just something you don't, maybe that's my bias of looking at it, right?
Well, yeah, no, I was thinking the same. I remember watching that and going, okay, yep, it's a time capsule for real. I think the other piece, piggybacking on what you meant about, like, guru and is it really counseling? Is it not really counseling? It was like finding out that in these videos, it's not an actual counseling room, that they're in a studio. And that, like, and the fact that you just mentioned that, they're shooting this over multiple years, that it sounds like Gloria, what, did she have to come back?
Gloria was just filmed in the first series, so she didn't come back, but they had a different client in each series. And then the encounter groups, he wasn't at least I didn't see her a part of the encounter groups, where that's where I assume, they just signed some kind of agreement when I'm coming for this weekend and it's going to be a part of this group.
So interesting. And so, it does kind of break my heart. Because I didn't know that they now that we're talking about it, it makes sense that probably they would pursue some sort of financial gain from this video. And, then then the next thing I think about is, the ethics about that, here were these pioneers of psychotherapy, these pioneers that we think we put on a pedestal, actively play a part in something that I'm like, oh, that's a little, I don't know if that's a really good idea, or a very ethically gray space, especially considering, that she obviously didn't seem to be aware when as far as to pursue a lawsuit around it. So the only other piece that I remember the first time watching that was just how shocked I was that she did choose pearls, because I remember watching it and I was like, this guy's being a jerk. And I remember, in my baby therapist brain thinking, I would never do this. Is this what I'm supposed to do? And then coming back and she's like, yes, I like him. I just remember that I was shocked by that. And so I'm thankful that we're talking about, the authenticity around that decision, why they made her make a decision, that decision too. I thought was interesting that they not made her, but had her choose. I thought that was something that was interesting. It was an interesting move, I think. No.
Well, and again, that from an educational perspective, one of the things that I'm trying to build into the course is, what is the role of the therapist, right? And to me, what is clear is, obviously these three men, they created their theory. It is sort of theory driven, right? Versus where maybe today we're a lot more collaborative and we would sort of join with our client a little bit more. And, not that, again, we should be working from theory as well, but we also know the alliance is such a strong predictor of change too. Again, to your point, Gloria, really just sort of feeling uncomfortable and sort of getting mad at him. Again, his technique was to get her out of her head, to stop intellectualizing and just to sort of be present. But when he was calling her a phony and like, how does this doesn't necessarily seem helpful. And again, I don't know, like I tried to find some other films and he's sort of the same way, but also in other ways, maybe a little toned down. And so again, is there a theatrical piece there as well from Pearls? Again, who knows? So, but anyways, just sort of again, and I guess to your other point about sort of the ethics, the organization that became the American Counseling Association, they first produced a code of ethics now, again, I believe it was mid 50s. Don't quote me on that. 56 maybe. And so that's obviously before that. The APA had a code of ethics as well, but it's uncertain if, I guess, which code of ethics, they probably weren't filing the one that was now the ACA because they were PhD level, maybe more psychologists, and so it's again, just looking at how the codes evolve. So again, just informed consent, dual roles might not have been, sort of that same perspective as we have today. And did Gloria really feel like she could stop at any time? Was there any kind of protections for her afterwards? Again, I don't know what kind of information that we have about that.
Well, and I just also think about, I'm thankful that you mentioned that book written by your daughter, because now that is where my curiosity goes then too, where, how would I feel as subject matter in one of these, not just being a participant, but being, having even less control, or I guess having even less control in this situation where I'm being talked about and I'm being displayed in countless classrooms of therapists and students. I can only imagine the amount of emotions and thoughts I would have around that. So I don't know. Any other thoughts?
I guess maybe my last point that I just wanted to point out too, watching it from again 25 lens and Gloria's, why she was saying she was coming to counseling. She was a single mom. She wanted to sort of date again, was dating, having some, I guess, identity or conflict about wanting to date but not being married. And what if Pammy asked her, would she have relations with somebody? And she was a sexual being, but maybe was feeling guilty about that, feeling guilty about wanting to be a good mother. And so to me, it's glaring all these cultural values that obviously when you're in 1965, maybe you don't see, but when you're in 2025, it's so easy to see. And I guess for beginning counselors, this is a great example of sort of the cultural piece, and to see how values and how we interpret values and ways of being can impact how we think or behave or feel that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I like the approach that you're taking to, like, because there's just so many more layers to that video. And I remember my first viewing of that, I was just simply looking at it as like a framework for theory. But I appreciate that we're like adding more layers to it of like a cultural piece. Okay, now let's look at it from like an ethical piece. There's just a lot more to it that's not being, I think, unpacked as much. So any other thoughts, any other feelings, any other things popping up?
Well, I guess, now we just then to put the bow on it is what can we really learn from it from 2025, right? So who drives therapy? Are we really looking at the systemic cultural values issues of the time and how that can cause mental distress? Are we really keeping ethics at the forefront? Can we really look at, again, technique or the intervention as well, and how we use that to plan? So I guess, again, from the educational perspective, how can we still, I guess, honor and value Gloria for what I guess she's still continuing allowing us as educators and students to benefit from and still, I guess, still grow, And even like, it's interesting to also note, again, I'm thinking like this, like if this was a museum piece, if this was an artifact, that we need to tell the whole story, and in ways we are, right, by telling these things. But, again, these three therapists got pretty famous. And so we need to acknowledge who they were and maybe the flaws that they had, and not necessarily say just because they did it, it was right. And there was some, I guess we, again, need to take a holistic picture to understand them as well and their flaws. So
yeah, it's a lot more gray. I mean, without sounding reductive, it's not just a black and white. Here's how to do a theory. Watch this video. It is such a more gray space of like, just because we're watching, just because we're watching these very famous psychotherapists do something doesn't mean this is the right way or the way to do this.
Right. Keep ourselves in check as well when we start. I always call it drinking our own Kool-Aid, right? When we start thinking we're grander than we are. And so I think this is a good, what would if somebody was viewing us from 60 years from now, what would they say? And good thing we're recording these podcasts for posterity, that somebody can look at us in 60 years to say.
I have no doubt that in 60 years, we'll look back on one of these episodes and go, I can't believe I said that.
What were they talking about?
Right. Well, and I mean, if I were to add anything too, I mean, I think that was a perfect, mentor moment. It's got me thinking about, my own recordings, because, going through supervision and being, pre-licensed meant, or at least at Youth in Need, we would have recordings, and we would do those recordings of our sessions with our supervisor. And you and I have just spent, close to 45 minutes talking about one. And granted, it's a very famous recording, but hundreds and thousands of therapists make their own recordings every day. And I'm not sure that we spend as much time thinking about just how special and intimate and how serious those recordings are. It's not simply just a learning thing, but it is this is a snapshot of this person's life, of that person's culture, of our own culture, that it's not just a simple homework assignment either, but it can certainly have a lot more weight to it than maybe we view it as just a training tool, So got me thinking. Any other thoughts? Any other things?
I am thoughtless now. So
any resource review, any books, articles, things that you want to shout out for people to check out?
I guess I would, as you already did, shout out Gloria. Go to YouTube, just the Gloria films. They are now in 4K HD, so they're a little better visual quality. So, and look at it at a different light, from a different perspective.
Absolutely.